Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Mastering Dungeons. We hope all of you role-playing game fans, players, game masters out there are looking forward to another week. I am Shawn here with my friend Teos Abadia. Hey Teos, what's the haps?
I was visited in Portland. Well, okay, he didn't come to see me, but James Introcaso was in Portland. He and his lovely wife, and so I got to see him. We hung out, we had a meal, we chatted about the game industry and all sorts of fun stuff. All of the exciting things about MCDM, which we'll have more in the show later. But yeah, it was super neat. He said he's like the nicest guy in the world, right? So it was just everything was pleasant and laughs, all of that.
I was visited by him via text, saying that he was running Peril and Pinebrook for a family member's birthday. And I thought, that's awesome. Thank you for letting me know, James. And he is the nicest guy. So I didn't get the full James Introcaso experience. You did. I'm jealous, but I got a small taste of it.
That's good. I mean, every taste is good of James.
This cannot be disputed. It got weird there. We like it weird. And we also like hearing from our listeners. We like hearing from them via all the social medias. And so we take a few questions or comments, and we're going to do so this week as well. First, via YouTube from Servant B36, asking about alignment. Is your dissatisfaction with alignment more about its impact on gameplay and mechanics, or its simplistic portrayal of morality and character complexity? Should a fantasy game's alignment system reflect real-life nuances, or is it sufficient to use it as broad archetypes as a starting point for character development? Does this stem from D&D's all things to all people generic fantasy approach to RPG design, as opposed to other games' more opinionated takes? I'm thinking of 13th Age and MCDM and other explicitly heroic role-playing games. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on better ways to describe characters apart from alignment. Now, to be clear, Teos and I think, differ a bit on this question. So I'm the one that is dissatisfied with alignment, and sometimes I play it up for the clicks, as the kids would say. But yeah, I am dissatisfied, and here's why. Alignment is a tool that has been used in D&D since there has been D&D. And for the most part, it's been a tool for role-playing purposes. There have been points where it was also mechanical, but that sort of thing has waxed and waned over the years about how mechanical we make it. So, and alignment mechanics are mostly gone from 5e. So let's just focus on it as a role-playing tool. And I was thinking about this, and I read another listener on YouTube who's Joe B3688, as opposed to Servant B36. Coincidence? I don't know.
Well, a little suspicious, let's be honest.
Yeah, and they talk about how they use alignment. Alignment, and this is from Joe B. Alignment is just like the whole game, abstract representation. I have my players choose it. It is a role-playing tool, and a few times it may be important in the mechanics. Quote, I have chosen to be good and follow laws, says the player who takes a certain alignment. And then we have a conversation about what that means. Take the abstract, we decide together what it looks like for that character using the choice as a reference. It doesn't mean you can't do evil or chaotic. It just tells me as a DM a guideline about what kind of choices a player will probably make. And my experience is that Joe B there is using the tool about as well as you can use it. And in my experience since first edition AD&D, I hate all of that. Right? Now, again, this is my experience over 30 years, and I'll break it down. And hop in at any point, Teos, because I'm just going to go until you stop me.
I'm enjoying this. Go ahead.
So the one part of this is, we choose an alignment, then we have a conversation about what it means. All right. Now, as part of a session 0, communication is important, but I have about 1 hour or 2 hours or 4 hours of other things to talk about. With all those other things to talk about, one of the things I don't want to talk about is, okay, you chose lawful good. Let's talk about what that means and the situations where it might come up. Okay, you chose chaotic neutral. Let's talk about that. And communication's great. But when it's talking about something that I think could be done more easily, more effectively, and more richly, I don't want those conversations. Now we're talking about philosophy as opposed to games.
Mm.
Are you with me so far,
Yeah.
Teos? Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to jump
Yep.
in? Okay.
Yep.
Then there's the quote, we take the abstract and we decide together what it looks like for that character using the choice as a reference. And I get this. But then what you get into the conversation is, what would you do in this situation? What would you do in this situation? What would you do in this situation? And even if you only do 5 situations, is that an hour of talk? Is that a half hour of talk for one character? And those are the only in 5 instances where something might happen. And within the first section, there's going to be the 6th thing. And then we have to stop and talk about it for the 6th thing.
Mm-hmm.
When what you could say is, tell me your character's goals and one rule in life that they like to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are not getting into philosophy. We are just saying to this player, give me some words that we understand the meaning of.
Yeah.
To tell me about your character. And I'll just get to the final thing.
Mm-hmm.
It tells me as a DM, as a guideline, what kind of choices a player will probably make. Probably, okay, we're already on shaky ground, but it doesn't tell you what kind of choices that character will probably make or that player will probably make, because the player can make any choice they want for that character. They can say, in my life, this is exactly how I am. And then they come up to a situation and they decide, you know what? All the things that I believed as a character, they're out the window. I now believe this. Yeah. And all of that discussion we've had, really, other than the big turn, whether it's a heel turn or a face turn, if you use pro wrestling parlay, has gone for naught.
So, if I think about where alignment came from, right, it comes from this sort of like law chaos paradigm in novels. Mm-hmm. And it was at a point when the game kind of was still very war gamey, just you get to play a character. And so having some simplistic way that you could say, I lean this way or that way, added a new dimension to the game that was kind of cool, when otherwise there were nothing like that was going on. Not that we can't see, like, I'm not going to get all ancient historical, but there are plenty of examples of people role-playing and LARPing type behavior throughout early role-playing game stuff. But what a lot of people were doing is stabbing stuff with their swords. So adding this is pretty sweet. Mm-hmm. In my early games of playing basic and AD&D, alignment was this like really interesting piece that would lay onto everything else. Like it would be an overlay over everything that you're doing, that the DM could kind of use to remind you of the fact that this is a role-playing game, right? So they'd say things like, your cleric wouldn't do that because you espouse these virtues, and now you're trying to go this way. That doesn't make sense. It's not coherent. It would say that you cannot be like that paladin, because the paladins must all be lawful good, right? And are these paragons of virtue and law and whatever. And so that adjustment constantly happened. And you even had in 3rd edition spells that would say, it only damages these kinds of people, right? So the ethos was of these alignment axes were constantly being drummed into the game. And they were used as sort of almost like course correctors of the type of play you're doing, which I think made sense for what the game was then. And I think they can still be fun. This is where you and I disagree in some ways. I think that, for example, if you were to dig into Dragonlance, I think that, 5th edition, when it had its Unearthed Arcana Dragonlance, had these ideas of alignment in various pieces. And I thought, that could be really interesting to give it a shot in this day and age to say, okay, if we really say that to wear the black robes means this, and to be a mage that wears the white robes means this, and that to be this kind of knight means this thing, and we're going to dig into that. Now that's kind of cool, right? You're joining the alignment club, and it matters. And in interactions with NPCs, this will come up. And when you cast spells, it means, and what you can access. And that's really cool if you go into it. But if you don't, you end up where we are today, which is I've done this at a table at a convention, and I invite anyone who wants to see how important alignment is in today's era to do the same. Tell everybody to flip their character sheets over, or not look at them or whatever, and then ask them, all right, tell me what your character's alignment is. Doesn't matter if it's a brand new character or level 20, people have no idea. I mean, there'll be someone at the table who goes, of course I'm, whatever. Or they guess neutral good and it's accurate. But a lot of times people have no idea now because we're no longer using that as a tool. Nothing in the game's reinforcing it. And role playing, we now have so many examples of how to do this that we just don't use it as a guide. And that to me is my problem, to go back to the original question, is that it's the wrong tool for the job we want today, unless we're going to do all this other stuff to it. And it's really clear that Wizards of the Coast isn't going to do that. And so if the official game isn't going to do it, at most you've got maybe some third-party product that would do it, but this is the wrong tool. And as you said, it's better to ask questions that are really along the line of the axis that matters, which is the campaign story, right? That's where you want to say, like, hey, this campaign is about blah. So here's what I want to know about your character, right? We are doing Storm King's Thunder, and how do you feel about these various areas being attacked by giants? What is it that you wish you could do within this geographic scope? What are the goals of your character? How do you feel about the Zentarum? These kinds of things are much more important than, are you neutral, evil, law, good, chaos? They don't, they don't align with story anymore the way that we play.
Yeah. And part of this for me is scarring from my college days. When I was forced to take 9 credits of philosophy, 9 credits of theology, and we had all these arguments. And what it comes down to is there is no right answer. And there are several right answers to what is good, what is lawful, what is unlawful, what is all of these. And so to try to answer them through a game, it's fine to try to answer them through a game, but it's not right to debate them through a game.
Yeah.
I want to know what your character is thinking as they do it, as opposed to what would they do because you've put this tag on them.
Yeah. I think D&D worries that, having an 18 strength and having a lawful good alignment, these are two of the most obvious sort of meme-worthy type things we see out there.
Yeah.
And my answer to that is lean into other memes, right? We've got the critical hit. We've got other things. Like, just lean elsewhere and let these go is probably because we're just not using them in the game. And if you really, really want them, then you got to lean into them in the game, and then they're not leaned into, and so you're just better off skipping them. Now, if it works for any one DM, awesome. Like whatever works at your table works at your table. There's no two ways about it. But as for most tables,
I've gone through enough education and through enough experience with storytelling that sort of cut and dry thing is the least interesting part of a character's story.
Yeah.
And so and like you said, it was a tool that was put in place, and it can be fun, right? The memes are funny. The little charts with the people, or
Batman is all alignments,
pizza,
right?
The pizza topping, right? Whatever.
Your toast.
Right. But you need to look beyond that tool to better tools that have been created by other games.
Yeah.
To do the same thing, to talk about tough moral dilemmas without saying good and evil. Yeah. Because there's so many shades of gray in there that you need to drill in on what that character's story is.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun in the Greyhawk section, right, where we've looked at these various countries that are tagged as being a particular alignment. And on one hand, that's a little bit helpful because you're reading the description
Yeah.
of yet another empire, and you're like, are these good people? But then you realize that a lot of times the answer is based on these perception of like, oh, if you are nomads, well, of course you're chaotic. It's like, really?
Right.
Or maybe resource constrained. Maybe I
Yeah.
can't just stay in one
Right.
place and grow crops. And
Right.
and so there, it's such an inexact thing. I think also that alignment is primarily around guidelines, which means barriers and constraints, lines that when you break, we're supposed to do something, rather than facilitation of cool stuff your character can do. And that's where, to me, it's the biggest problem with it, right? If the shackles aren't going to be fun, and they seldom are, because nobody spends the time on them to make them fun that way, then you're better off with other guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for the question, and thank you for the comments to both of you to help us sort of get through that question. And we have another question via Luck Whisker coming to us via YouTube again. So in light of the sigil conversation, that's the virtual tabletop that Wizards has been showing off, I would be interested in hearing more of your perspective about using digital tools, especially at the table. Have either of you played in many online games? When you play in person, do you and your players have laptops open to use D&D Beyond and other tools like character sheet managers, VTTs, etc.? As DMs, what are your preferred tools for battle maps at the table? Dry erase, paper, minis, theater of the mind. And how does this experience affect your thinking about the way Sigil is likely to be received by the community? Will you use it in your own games? When and why or why not? Teos, I rambled last time, so you go first this time.
Well, my last game I ran was one of my favorite ways to run a game, which is a vinyl battle map, wet erase pens, drawing out what's going on and doing it. And the reason it's one of my go-tos, and the thing I would generally advise to anybody to use if you're going to use minis, is because this frees you up. It frees up your headspace to do all of the other things that are great about the game, right? Role playing, characters, blah, blah, blah. You don't get locked into too much. If I have the time and I will make the most of it, then other tools are great, whether they're dungeon tools or tiles, dungeon tiles, Dwarven Forge, right, which is gorgeous. I love height. I love things that players can move around and see what's on the other side of. Like, that's super cool to use terrain and things like that. Love it, love it, love it. But it is a fun option, and you've got to do that extra work to make it pay off. I have played tons and tons of online plays. I used to, during 4th edition, play, I don't know, 2 or 3 games a week on Map Tool, which was an early VTT. I also played on, I don't remember what it was that we always played back then, but it was very text-based with, kind of very simple moving stuff around. Yeah, I did a lot of that during Living Forgotten Realms, and it was fine. I've done a lot of Roll20. In general, what I find is, as a player, totally fine. As a DM, I find that the time I spend setting up online stuff exhausts me versus the time I spend, say, doing Dwarven Forge or drawing a battle map or laying down dungeon tiles. That energizes me. I don't know why. And I've heard people say the exact opposite for them, right? So I think it varies by person. But for me, setting up an online thing exhausts me, and so it doesn't give, it robs me of energy rather than giving it. So I tend to not do it, and it's just going to vary by person. I think Sigil looks gorgeous. I think that what I would want most out of it is ready to go drop rooms that I would just go kind of like a fully built Dwarven Forge thing, right? Like, take that really cool thing and let me just drop it down pre-built and join it with a corridor. And then if I'm going to add stuff to it, I can drop in features. I like that idea. That would be neat. But I want the minimum. I do not want to Lego build every piece. And I say that as a person who loves Legos in real life.
Yeah. So for me, there's 2 questions here. There's the tools conversation of how do you digitally use these tools to make play better? And it is, for me, I like D&D Beyond. I also like character sheet in front of me. I can do both. And I try not to tell people this is how you should or this is how you have to, because who knows what their situation is. Um, so in that way, use what's best for you. In terms of like presentation of the game, this is what I used last time. I am showing a big, gorgeous battle map.
Yeah, it's got like different like glowing areas and yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's that from?
This is from the Ghostfire Gaming's Citadel of the Unseen Sun.
Yes.
A pack of and it was I usually use wet erase, on a vinyl map or on a plastic map or whatever. But if I can get my hands on something like that that completely matches the adventure, then that's how I will go. Because one of my design credos is put one cool thing in each combat or each encounter. And sometimes if that one cool thing is complicated, it's hard to draw it quickly. So that's why I love having a battle map. The first, I mean, I play online. During COVID, I learned how to use Roll20, ran a couple different adventures on that, but it was all, I purchased it. It was all set for me. And I could build stuff, but like you, Teos, it enervated me to do that. I just wanted to run.
Yeah.
Winter Fantasy. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Winter Fantasy, several years ago, pre-COVID, someone brought this flat screen television to set on the table. And this was the first time I'd seen it used this way. They had Roll20, they set the map up, and I thought, oh, this is going to be really cool. And everyone would walk by and go, oh, cool, cool. And they were watching and asking questions. And what ended up happening, the DM was great, don't get me wrong, but it was, okay, you've gone to a new encounter. Let me get the map up. 5 minutes pass. Oh, let me resize it so it fits the minis that I'm going to put on and your minis. Right. Okay. And it slowed the game down to the point where it didn't add to the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It detracted from it. I would have rather had the vinyl maps and drawing because it would have saved us probably a 20 minutes to a half hour of a 4-hour session. It's the old technology thing, right? Technology should enhance things, whether it's education or business or whatever. It should enhance, not interrupt.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get to a point where it interrupts rather than enhances.
Yeah. I feel the same way. And I forgot to say kind of how I feel about digital like character sheets and stuff. I'd rather not have them. And a lot of my players do like them. I don't make a big deal. If they want to have a laptop or an iPad at the table, it's fine. I don't care. Or let's say I'm not going to cause trouble around it. But I will say that I find that when they play on paper pregens, they are more present than when they are using digital tools. Because there's some amount of headspace that's going towards that lower my hit points, and the menus and the whatevers that takes a little bit more effort away from being there and looking each other in the eye and hearing the joke that someone else made or hearing the cool insight another person landed, right? Those kinds of things happen more when you're just looking at each other. And sometimes I think that people's love for like indie games, some part of it is the fact that a lot of times we're playing those without any tools because none exist. And so we're totally in the middle of it, right? Like you go to a convention game or whatever, and you're totally into this thing. And there's just the gameplay being paid attention to. When we go back to what may be our root game, we probably have all these tools and whatevers and thingies, and we bog it down so that we're not in that immediacy, right? But we can easily have it. It's always there to be had. Again, no issue with anybody who loves all these tools and has fun. But in general, I don't really find that. To me, that's not the amazing part of the game. And if I think of 5E's resurgence, I think it's because it's what Rodney Thompson said in a video recently. It's the idea that the rules can recede into the background and the play carries forward.
Definitely a way that I would say a lot of people come to the game looking for that. And also then there's the counterpoint of there's the people that just want to play it as a game, and having all the books right there. They're
Mhm.
fully engaged. They're not putting their character sheet aside, pulling a book out, flipping. They can just click a link, go to the rules they
Mhm.
need, and that's a whole other
Yeah.
side of technology that is useful. That's helpful. That brings you closer to the game. So, you
Mhm.
know, all over the place. Short answer: whatever works for you and your group, do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and just pay that attention to think through. Hey, this
Mhm.
session, were people focused
Yep.
on the tool or were they focused on the game, and what would be more fun, right?
Yep. Now to our news and commentary section, starting with the 2024 Player's Handbook Errata. Did you know there was?
How would I know?
Teos,
How would I
you
know,
knew.
Shawn? Where let's where's the errata section of the D&D Beyond website? Oh, there
How
isn't
would you know,
one.
Teos? How did you know?
Well, I knew because Christian Hoffer, formerly of comicbook.com, I'm really sorry.
Mhm.
And they laid off many at comicbook.com. He is now writing some posts on Ian World. And one of those was gathering various errata that people are reporting that do not show up in the 2024 physical books, but show up in D&D Beyond. And you and I have been around. We've seen some games. We've seen some editions. We know that lots of games come out and immediately need errata. This is nothing new.
Mhm.
There are always things that, the game it's like any IT system, right? It's perfect until some user touches it.
Mhm.
And then you
Yep.
realize all the things that kind of pop. And that's the way it goes, no matter how much play testing you do. So there are a number of things that have changed. I don't have a problem with that as much as I don't have a problem. To me, that's just the reality of games. But I do have a problem with the fact that I can't go anywhere official to find this list. And if you're going to change stuff in the digital rules, wizards, I want to know it. I want you to tell me. I don't care if you change italics, it italicization. Yeah, sure. I want to know. Like, I want you to tell me, right? We applied format changes, or something like that. But especially if you're going to do things like say that shields now require the utilize action to don or doff, and that's not in my player's handbook. You need to tell me you made that change. The giant insect
Mhm.
spell now clarifies its hit points and changes it on whether you're fourth level and above, and that you got to tell me any of this stuff.
Mhm.
Goliath's powerful build grants advantage on ability checks to end the grappled condition instead of saving throws. You got to tell me somehow.
Yeah. So D&D Beyond has not provided a list of that errata, but and they also haven't transferred previous 2014 5e errata from that they had up on the website. So the dnd.com or wizards.com website had a list of errata. When that site went away, nothing was transferred to D&D Beyond, so we can keep track of the errata that has been.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something we brought up at the summit. It's something that I've emailed them since then to kind of say, hey, this issue is still there, or and I'm the most I've heard is something along the lines of like, oh, we're working on that, and it's not that hard. Bring the files over, create a new file. Someone's tracking this somewhere because someone's telling somebody to make these changes in D&D Beyond. So there's a document somewhere. Pretty that thing up and get it out there so we have it. Maybe they're waiting for the official launch release to come out when everybody has the book. But if you're going to make it on D&D Beyond, it should be documented.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No argument there. Anything else about
Yeah.
this issue you want to mention?
One thing that D&D Beyond did do is they put up a page that shows the differences between 2014 and 2024. It's not as detailed. It's not the same as what we covered last week that Tom Christie pulled together in a document. But it's focused more on like D&D Beyond character creation. But it is at least a way to see some things that have changed. Like it doesn't say all the feats that are new, but it does identify all the spells that are new, some changed items, some changed terms. So things like, I had missed that starvation is now called malnutrition. I'm like, okay, that's good for me to kind of put a pin in and a good document to have as a creator. So there are a number of these things that are useful. But it's only a partial view, and I think it's fair to say and important to remember that there have always been 2014 elements. that were not fully implemented in the character sheet in D&D Beyond. That's going to be the case of 2024 as well. So, I think most folks who are pretty fair in these kinds of things in their assessment have said, it's kind of like it was before. There's some things in the new classes that aren't there, some things that are, and that's all right.
We go from digital to sort of analog with Time Magazine's D&D special now available out in stores. Go to your favorite newsstand. Kids, newsstands are these places that were usually out on the street where you could buy these paper books that we called magazines. And Time Magazine was one of those. And they now have a special D&D issue to celebrate the 50th anniversary of D&D. You can also go to Amazon to buy it, of course. And we don't have a copy, but friend of the show, Walt, says, I think it's a nice little collector's piece. Whether it's worth the $15 cover price is debatable. I haven't finished flipping through it yet, but the articles I've read are top notch, even if none of the info will be new to someone like you or us. Overall, I'm happy with the approach. This looks at D&D with an air of legitimacy, not just some niche hobby for nerds, and is aimed at educating mainstream readers. There's, of course, the obligatory promotion of the new edition, but it really does cover the full spectrum of the hobby as it exists today, from Baldur's Gate to the movie to actual plays to its use in therapy, along with the cute puff pieces about stuff like why we love dice and who is Vecna.
Neat. Yeah, and thank you for Walt for that breakdown. Walt also provided a what all the different articles are and the list of pages, so you can see that in our show notes. It talks about all kinds of things like making Honor Among Thieves movie, all this stuff, Stranger Things, biggest actual plays. There's a lot of things there and nice articles all there.
Yep. And someone said, the name eludes me, but someone who I've worked with, an artist who I've worked with, said that an artist who I've had do pieces just for me and my family, for our characters, said that Matt Morrow, there we go, it came to me. Matt Morrow said that one of his pieces of art was used in the Time magazine. So
yeah,
kudos.
That's great.
Yes, but they talk about the partnerships and all the licensed D&D products, but what are we lacking still, Teos?
No D&D baloney. Though I mean, I still, I think we've hit baloney levels with what 5e has been able to do this last year. I mean, what did we have? We've had
nerds, we've had Legos.
Yeah, the Legos is really big, and there was another one that I remember thinking like, oh, this is what I was looking for. I can't think of it now, but I think we've surpassed the baloney levels because we have to think baloney was in Spain. And that's great. I love Spain, but that's limited compared to sort of, say, the giant U.S. market of various things. And we have now enough examples, like the stamps, for example, right? Like everybody walking into a post office, seeing a poster of D&D stamps, as I did when I walked into my post office not too long ago. That is amazing. That beats baloney right there. And so I think even if the Pop-Tarts didn't happen, this has been really strong, and we are past the baloney levels. So good job, D&D.
True story. Something that's not baloney. Bald Band Games has an organized play survey that they've been sending out to people who play D&D and who go to conventions and maybe play organized play. So if you don't know, Bald Band Games is the group that organizes convention games for Wizards of the Coast. So if you go to Gen Con and play the official D&D stuff, if you go to some of the PAX conventions and a few other conventions around the country, some of the Comic-Cons even, there will be an organization. Teos was representing Bald Man Games when you ran stuff at PAX Prime or PAX West just last week. So they've put up a survey asking some questions about your interest in organized play of various kinds, both who you are as a player or a game master, and what your expectations or your desires are for organized play content. And so we have a link in our show notes. It's baldman.link and then BMGOP_survey. And you can go there and you can, tell Bald Man Games folks what you're looking for in your organized play and convention events.
Yeah. Very exciting.
Yep. And speaking of James Introcaso, MCDM has released a Draw Steel Creator license. And since you talked to James last, I'm
Yeah.
going to let you talk about this.
Yeah, it's really cool. MCDM has often pondered, exactly how to open things up. What's the best way to allow creators to create in that space? And they're doing this with the latest backer packet, right? Draw Steel is not out yet as a game, so this is kind of a test, which I think is kind of smart. So creators who are backers, right? You have to be a Patreon backer. You can take that backer packet and you can create with it. Now, it is important to notice that the license can change at any time, right? This is kind of a test of the system. You can't use art, but you can use literally everything else. Check the fine print to make sure that I'm right. And we've got a link to the license in our show notes, or you can go to mcdmproductions.com. But you can use proper names, right? You can use lore bits, all of that. You just can't use the art, but you can use the rules, the mechanics, all this stuff in the backer packet and create things for it. And that's really kind of neat, right? You can't use their logos. You can't say it's an official MCDM product because, of course, it's not. But you can see all of that, and there's a specific text that you'll put on the cover of your product to show that it is done through the creator license. But really neat. So if you're interested in that, go see the MCDM Productions website for the full information on it.
So where can you publish this?
Yeah, you can sell this. You can do free stuff. You can do for sale things. And I think you can publish anywhere you want. So again, I've only give it a quick once through read, but I didn't see any limits on where you can sell. There isn't a DM's guild or anything like that. Like you could go and publish for the world of Draw Steel and use a famous personage and all of that. As I understand it, if it's something that's in that backer kit document, then you can use it. Again, I'd be careful if you want to go beyond that, then you need to read it carefully. Like if I want to use something from a previous published product, that's not in backer kit 1, so I'd have to read the fine print, but it's a neat initial test, right? I think it's a nice way to do it so you can see if folks are interested in it. As a creator, you could publish something small, test the waters, see how the interest is there. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. We had Matt Colville on the Eldritch Lorecast last week, and he was very careful not to mention Draw Steel, even though I wish he would have, and I wish he would have talked about this because that would have been very fascinating. But that's okay. And we go from MCDM's Draw Steel to Arcane Library's Shadowdark. There is a new Shadowdark Hex crawling rule set. So, of course, the Arcane Library is the publisher of Shadowdark, and they are providing a free download of some hex crawling rules, part of 3 Cursed Scroll zines that will be kickstarted soon. These rules are similar to other OSR, old school Renaissance style hex crawlers. You roll to see if your terrain changes so that you don't get big variances like going from a desert and then all of a sudden you're standing in a river. What else is in this pack?
Yes, I mean, it's really short, as we expect from Shadowdark, right? It's all brief and contained with the idea that you're going to add to this as needed. In general, what's going to happen is the DM is going to roll for weather. They're going to determine and share which hexes nearby are visible to the party and determine the danger levels of those places. PCs can then make checks as sort of tasks they take on. Sort of if you think of like one person's the navigator, that kind of thing. One person's foraging. And those things can provide various benefits, like giving you, is it called luck token? I forget. But whatever it is that can give you like rerolls and things like that. And then based on that, you may change things, right? So even though the DM determined the weather, you can actually withstand it better. So the weather becomes 1 better for you, right? So you can change things after the fact if you succeed at your tasks. You can even lower the danger level, right? Because you're prepared for things. It's a kind of nice, elegant, simple system way to do it. Then PCs say, hey, this is the way I want to go. The DM rolls for random encounters every other hex, and you kind of repeat various steps over and over again. There are also things for camping, which is a nice addition. So you can, when you bed down for the night, the DM's going to check for random encounters twice. PCs have different tasks that they're doing, so that can also affect things. And we get rules for traveling quickly, making a hex safe, like you want to clear the place out and make it non-dangerous. And then ideas for the kinds of threats and counter tables that you would do and stuff. it's pretty neat. Yeah, and there are things also like what a hex will contain, whether there's an obvious thing to be found or if it's hidden and you must locate it. Yes. So a lot of nice rules. It's very similar to other OSR rules that are out there for hex crawling if you're into it. And I think a lot of it is really, to what extent you love a procedure like this versus just saying, here's the story I'm going to put down for the party to roll off of, or I'm going to play off of what the party does and just decide what shows up. This is really a procedure, right?
Yeah. We made a similar thing for 5e with Aurora, sort of exploration and then settlement creation. And I'm curious then to read this to see how it breaks it down. It simplifies. I want to run or play a Shadowdark campaign for more than just a one shot.
Yeah.
Just to play it as it is meant to be played. And I need to find the time and the people. But
and my players are mad at me for murdering them in the gauntlet, won't let me run Shadowdark. I am curious to see how that works. I've also been reading Justin Alexander's book, which is full of very procedural type stuff that I don't quite jive with. But for the reason that I don't jive with it, I want to try it out and kind of understand it better so I can see where my view of that might exist. And speaking of Grimhollow stuff, Shawn, I picked up, these arrived in the mail. It's the player kind of setting book for Grimhollow Valikan clans, and I'm also holding up the adventure itself that comes with it. And these are really cool. The art and layout are just absurd, top notch. And you've talked about some of the neat things that are in here before, but I was kind of struck by a couple of things. I held them up in opposite order, but anyway, when I look at the one that has kind of player facing stuff and campaign kind of how rules, the use of maneuvers for classes is really cool and creative. Where all classes, at first I thought, oh, this is just like a maneuver, like a battle master type thing, but no, it's like druids have maneuvers and monks have maneuvers and sorcerers have maneuvers, and it really injects a lot of flavor into the play. And these all come through subclasses. And then also there are the way that you define your character has a really nice system where you, and you've kind of talked about, instead of really leaning deeply into what your species is, what you're doing is defining what aspects of your clan you pick for yourself. And you get a number of things that you get to do, like being a gifted performer or being able to hide more capably. And you get a number of these, and so you can actually like double down and do two things. And now you're like better at it because you get the second level out, right? You're a born healer, you gain proficiency in a medicine skill. But if you take two of these, you become a war doctor, and now you can do the check with advantage and so on and so forth. And I really like that system for defining your character. And I think the player, it's the kind of thing that when I read it, I was like, well, players, if I drop this on my players, they'd be like, oh yeah, I want to make my character now. Like, exciting stuff.
I can tell you why you love it. It's because it started with Aurora, and it started with Scott Gray, who I said, let's build a system where you can, instead of using a species, you can build based on all of the things, ancestry, species, background, build a character. And then we looked at it and we said, this can work even in a more traditional setting than Aurora if we focus it. And that's why clans, right? Even if you might be a dwarf, but you're from a magic using clan. So all of the stonework stuff that you think is part of a dwarven background, you don't take that. You take this spellcasting stuff because you're from Clan Rune, and your clan is all about using magic. So we tried to build a system, and we're going to be using that in the Grimhollow Reforged or Transformed Kickstarter coming up. We're going to do it for the whole setting. So thank you.
Great stuff. Credit where credit's due. Really nice.
Appreciate it. And speaking of creators, we have our creator corner, starting with Jeff Stevens, who talks about in his newsletter, Pay What You Want. Pay what you want is one of those things that some people are like, yes, it's very useful. And some people are like, never ever put up a pay what you want product. And Jeff gives some details about what pay what you want has meant to him and his company. So his product called Encounters on the Savage Seas 3 has been downloaded 10,316 times. It's a gold bestseller. What does gold mean? Gold means it's actually been purchased between 500 and 1,000 times out of those 10,000 downloads. And it has 56 ratings and 3 reviews with 10,000 downloads.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Jeff recommend? He recommends using Pay What You Want to promote other products. So he would put a small sample of his recent like Missive Tiamat or his magic item book.
Yeah.
He puts up this small sample as Pay What You Want. So it gets 1,500 downloads, 280, almost 300 on Roll20, and then it leads into sales of the entire book or points back to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, really clever. I love his newsletter for these kinds of insights, and even if it's just one data point, it's a well thought out data point, and there's a lot of a lot of downloads and experience behind it, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And so we go from Jeff to Eberron. Frontiers of Eberron Quickstone is up for pre-order on the DM's Guild. Yes, you heard that right. Pre-order on the DM's Guild. Teos, you did a deeper dive into this than I did, so tell me all about it.
Yeah, I mean, so pre-order is really unusual. I don't know if it's ever happened before.
I can't think.
Yeah, the DM's Guild has allowed Keith Baker's company to put this up. You can buy it now, and it's been up, I think, for a little more over a week. And the actual product will arrive on September 17th. One of the folks on our Discord was saying, hey, maybe this is as a way to determine whether print will be available, and which could be smart. But it's already at Electrum and climbing, and I'm sure will soar once it's actually available. It is $33.95, which is not cheap, maybe in lots of people's eyes, but it is Keith Baker and his team. And Eberron's very popular, and he has often had the most popular things on the DM's Guild for quite some time. It details the western frontier, the contested land between the ancient kingdom of Breland and the rising nation of Droam. Quickstone is built for 5e 2024 already, which is pretty cool. It includes new species such as Harpy, Gargoyle, or Medusa, new feats, backgrounds, magic items, subclasses. There's an adventure. And so I looked over this advanced copy. It's 257 pages, very pretty, art everywhere, nice layout. Chapter 1 is really cool. It may be my favorite chapter in that the character roles are really nice ways to tie the players into the setting. In fact, both chapter 1 and chapter 2 are very much created with the idea of like, you are a DM running this. Let's make this as good as possible for you by involving your players. And so these character roles are story elements for your players that are going to make them more interested in this setting. There's great advice and elements to guide play and have ties to the land. There are things like the Western feels reinforced with rules for arcane duels and options to use like a wand or other item in addition to spells to like face off each other at high noon, right? Kind of fun. And then we've been talking with Greyhawk about how do you make settings interesting. And what's cool about their Gazetteer is it's really all player facing. So it is written speaking to the player. And that's a really neat trick, right? Like you're not, usually it's the DM that you're talking to. And so therefore everything is like secrets, but sometimes it's overdone and the history is not useful. In this way, everything is made so that the player gets the necessary information about this region, knows what's interesting, sees these things that are teases of what could be, and then the DM can decide to flesh that out, whatever seems interesting. Chapter 3 is the town of Quickstone. There's some really neat things, like, for example, groups that your characters can join with possible ties between the different groups for types of characters. Chapter 4 is player options. Chapter 5 is treasure. You can be a Warforged, right? So that's been updated. So you don't have to wait if you want an updated Warforged. Here's Keith's version of it. You can play a warg as a species. Chapter 6 has new monsters. These kind of have some fun features, like there's Demon Glass Warrior as a template with an example provided, but you can make anything into a Demon Glass Warrior. Chapter 7 then has the adventure. So very cool. I would give this my endorsement. It looks well worth the money and a lot of fun. I like a lot of the ideas here. If I were a creator, I'd recommend it as a way of studying this kind of product. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, the area of Droam in Eberron was always one that was fascinating to me because it was sort of the monster run setting.
Yeah.
There was it Dargoon was the goblins, goblinoid nation. But Drome was the much further away from humanoid sort of setting. So it's a fascinating place, and I'm glad that Keith gets this opportunity to share his creation with all of us.